Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to do property online today to help you win listings. That's the goal. For those of you that are joining us by GoToMeeting from outside the office, I would ask that you probably keep your mute on, and then when you need to join in, then you can unmute it, because otherwise we're going to get a lot of background noise and feedback. If someone is having difficulty hearing, let me know. There's also a chat option in the bottom of the screen where you can send messages through if you want to ask a question. The idea behind this is that it's not a formal thing. There's not like a script that I have here. This is supposed to be interactive so that you guys can learn together. So we've got people in front of me live in person, and then we've got people on the computer. So the idea is that we can open up the training to more people more often and have it more accessible. So for people that are in the room with me presently, when you guys go to speak, you're probably going to have to almost yell or ask the question, and I'll repeat the question back to everyone because the microphone on the laptop is unlikely to reach my people in the back of the room at the moment. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about the technology or anything before we start? I'm going to take silence as a no. Okay. Okay, so the first thing, and I have to tell you, it's a little weird sitting here. I'm looking at people with a computer screen behind me, and I'm looking at a computer. It feels a little bizarre. Normally I've done this by web viewer, but we can't do that with this many people. It'll just overwhelm it. So what we're going to do today is I wanted to show you, the reason for this session is I wanted to show you a tool that you have that you're paying for that you're probably not getting the best bang for your buck out of, okay? It's like when you buy a piece of, hardware technology or something and you only know how to do 2 things with it, but it actually does 50 things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that Property Online does that can give you an edge in your listing appointments, but also with your buyers, that I want to make sure you know and know how to maneuver within it and know how to read certain documents that are in here. Okay? So as we go, you're going to have questions, let me know, and we'll try and make sure we get them answered. If I think I'm going to answer it for you in a second, I'll tell you to just hang on and hopefully I'll cover it. But I do want this to be interactive, and I want you to get what you need from this session. Okay? Any questions before I start? No? Okay, perfect. Okay. So obviously, I'm hoping everybody knows how to log into Property Online. For everybody's benefit right now, we're in mine, so it's my bill as we tick through. Now, everybody worries about the cost of Property Online. I can tell you from using it a lot, because we use it a lot in our practice in my selling team, I don't think I've ever gotten a bill that was more than about $7 for a month, right? You have to be in it a lot. But don't leave it open. Everybody, when you're done with it, close it down. But when you're in there and you download documents, it's really costing you pennies. But when you get the listings or you negotiate the sale because of the info that's in there, you'll feel very comfortable with the pennies that you just spent on it. So we're going to go right into the non-compressed version. So now we are into the property inquiry. So the first thing that I want to recommend, and this will be something that I will be sharing with everybody from a listing perspective, when you are taking a listing, before you go on a listing appointment, in the ideal scenario, you will have checked on Property Online before you go. So there's several reasons why I would like you to do that, or that I would recommend that you do that. So the first reason is that you will then know before you get to the listing whether or not there is a third person on title. Very, very often you'll run into situations where you have a young couple, they bought their first house, they call you to sell it, they're super excited, I don't know, they're having another baby, they want to buy a bigger house, and you start to chat with them and you're doing your market analysis and all this sort of stuff, and then they never think to tell you that dad co-signed. So dad's on the mortgage. Well, we can't sign listing documents unless we have dad on that deal. So now you're drawing boxes on your listing agreement because for some reason the province has decided that only 2 people are ever involved in the real estate deal, right? So we're all handwriting boxes all over for additional initials on our listing documents. But when you go into that appointment compared to your peers with another office who then are running back to them later going, oh my God, didn't realize that, oh my gosh, dad is on, or who is this person if the name's not the same, and oh now we have to redo your listing documents and that type of thing because I didn't didn't check, right? So if you know before, when you're sitting there at the listing appointment, immediately you already look like a smarty your pants than the other person that was sitting there, because you're saying, well, I see we have somebody else on title. Are they still on title? Oh, we've made arrangements to have them pulled off, or we've, okay, great. So can I get the contact information from your lawyer? And all I need is a letter from the lawyer advising me that this person is no longer on title, and then I can sign documents just with you. Oh, well, no, Dad's still on title. Okay, well, great, but Dad's in, I don't know, the Yukon. So now I need to change my timelines for how long I'm going to leave offers open for, or amendments, because I need that other signature, okay? So when you're going in on a listing appointment with a really proactive plan on how to manage these things, you are already setting yourself apart. Does this make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay? So the idea behind this is to be the most informed of all of the realtors that they're going to interview. So simply by first knowing who they are. The other part of it is that the documents that you prepare for that listing the names on the documents must match the names that are on Property Online. So I'll give you an example. My name, as far as you guys are concerned, is Ann De Silva. That is not my legal name. My legal name is Elizabeth Ann De Silva, and my property is registered in Elizabeth Ann De Silva. My driver's license says Elizabeth Ann De Silva. The only person that calls me Elizabeth is Revenue Canada, and if somebody calls asking for Elizabeth, I've always instructed any of my administrators to take a message, because I don't know them. But if it would be improper for me to sign a listing agreement not in my full name. You get people who their names are short forms and that type of thing, or they have a middle name. Gosh, God forbid their name is John McDonald. You need that middle name. Okay, so all of that is on Property Online, and we'll go into a couple properties here and play with that so you can see it. Okay, yes, Layla.
What happens if the name that is on Property Online is, say, De Silva, and then you married and then bothered changing it online?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat Layla's question because I'm not sure if it was heard through the magical microphone system here. So her question was, what if the name on the title was De Silva, but then I got married and changed my name? Not going to happen. But anyway, what name do you do? You would actually use the name that's on title, and in often cases you'd put it in brackets, or you would make a note in the listing agreement that this is the name that's on title, but you have verified that they are married and that type of thing, right? Because technically, you need proof that they're the same person.
Where would you put that on the listing agreement, though?
You can put it under additional provisions,
Okay.
right? That's what that random box is for.
Okay.
In some cases, nobody goes back and changes their deed after they get married. Who does that, right? But you basically want to verify that it is the same person. So you could very easily verify that by saying, do you have a copy of your birth certificate? It'll show one name. Then your driver's license shows another. Okay, great. I verified that this person is the same person, right?
Is that the same for your FinTrack?
Yes.
Well, your FinTrack, if it's different, if the ID is different than what's on title, then you should be verifying something, right? The idea behind this and the whole reason for these rules is to prevent people from selling other people's houses out from underneath them, okay? And it's our responsibility to verify that information. It doesn't have to be invasive. It doesn't have to be rude. It's just presented in a manner that you are doing this in order that they will never have an issue as we proceed. This will ensure that everything is smooth and moves along in just a lovely fashion. Yes, Christiane?
So just, if we're using the name that's on title, but they actually sign their name now with the married name.
Yep.
Are they signing the name on the listing documents with what's on title?
Usually they sign their signature,
Yeah.
right? But you verified that they're the same person, right?
So,
Yeah, it's more about, and every situation is a little bit different. Some people have changed it. Some people didn't. They're married, but they haven't changed their name. I can't give you a 100% black and white. It's always going to be this way. I want you to use your judgment. But the main idea is that when we're sitting at the listing appointment, or you've gone back to do your market analysis after you've, everybody has a different process, that when you're having these conversations about, oh, just so you're aware, I noticed that we have 2 different names. Can you tell me what has happened? Oh, I got divorced. Maybe it's the other way, right? Let's be honest. Sometimes it's the other way. And I've gone back to my maiden name. Okay, perfect. I just need to verify that you are the same person, right? Because can you imagine if there was another Mary Smith and, she sold your house out from underneath you, right? The idea, again, is that 99% of the time there's never going to be an issue, but when you're in the listing appointment, you are presenting yourself as the person who's done more homework, who's done more due diligence because you've noticed these things that the other person didn't. And that's really the point of this, is not only will it cover you from there being any problems, but the idea behind this is that you will win the listing because you are immediately conveying yourself as more informed. And that's what I want you to get from this. Layla, yes?
So the name you're going to put down on the listing as the seller in the listing agreement, the addendum, is the name you find on the property.
It should match the deed. The question is, what do you write on the listing agreement? Your documents must match the deed. Unless you get an authorization from their lawyer to write it differently, the title is registered in that name. That's who has the authority to sell that property, right? So they have to match. Just like when you have clients who say, who write an offer, and they say, well, I'm not going to put my wife on the mortgage because, or my girlfriend on the mortgage because her credit is terrible, but I want her on the deed. You cannot do that. The documents, the mortgage documents and the deed have to match.
But that's not up to us to decide though, right?
No, but what I'm saying is if you understand that,
Okay.
right, then you don't write an offer with the wrong, you say, well, maybe we need to talk to the mortgage person first in terms of how we write the offer, or you might prep the other side to say, we may or may not have to put someone on or take someone off in order for financing. You're being more proactive is the idea. But you cannot have a deed that does not match the mortgage. Okay? Is this everyone good so far? Okay. So again, the purpose of this is not trying to micromanage how you write your deals. I'm just trying to make sure you understand there's information in here that when you're sitting with a client and you're saying, oh, I noticed X or I noticed Y, can you give me some clarification on that? You all have already demonstrated that you have done more research and are probably a little more thorough than some other people, which again distinguishes your value. The other piece of this, and Layla and I have been working on some training sessions for everybody coming up in the fall, and one of the sessions we're going to be doing is how to, I can't remember what we called it, Layla, but something about how to ensure you always get, how to get a minimum of 5% commission, right? And part of it is how to present your value so that they don't even ask about your price because they see the difference in what you're offering. So this is one little piece of how that builds towards that, okay? So when you're in property online, let's pull my house up. I'll use myself as a guinea pig, okay? So if I look up, oh, I don't need to look there. It's going to confuse me now. So I'm going to share my mortgage with everyone, not that it's a secret, okay? Okay, so here's a perfect example. So when I purchased this house, I was in the middle of a divorce, no separation agreement, no formalized child support. Banks don't really like that. Said, Mom, would you co-sign on my mortgage? They've never paid a cent for my house. They have no interest in it. They don't have anything to do with it. But at the time, it was something that I needed. So if you came to list my house and you wrote up my documents and wrote a listing agreement, I can guarantee you, you probably wouldn't, if you hadn't looked on this, you wouldn't know they're there. Now let's add another complication. John David Snowball, that is my maiden name, by the way, in case you had any, it is actually really my name. Here's the proof. My father is dead. So not only do I have 3 people on title, I have one who's deceased. So this is a real, my own house is the perfect example of why you need to check property online before. Because technically I cannot list my own house without getting my mother to sign on behalf and proving with a death certificate that my father is not signing. Layla has a question.
Sorry, guys.
No, I want you to ask questions.
But if they closed the estate, wouldn't his name have come off there?
Not unless we go back and change title and the lawyers tell you not to bother because we inherit the value, but I need to prove, I can't just say to you, oh, he's dead. And he's not going to sign, right? I need to actually get if I didn't want to give a death certificate, I could get a letter from my lawyer saying this is to advise that the interest in the property has been passed to these other two remaining owners and therefore the signature is not required. Because what will happen is let's say I get a deal done and I don't have the name there and I don't have any verification for it. If the buyer's agent is smart, they're going to catch this and say, wait a minute, where's John David Snowball? At the very least, one of the lawyers is going to catch it. So what I don't want you to do is to be running back to clients after a deal is done or negotiated going, oh, by the way, I now need an amendment or I need a direction to have so-and-so on it. Now let's say, for example, that it was, let's say John David was not my father. Say he was a spouse, okay? And let's say the parent was a co-signer. Let's say there's a divorce situation and you didn't know, there's no evidence of a man in my house, there's no man's clothing, there's no red flag, there's no anything, you know I'm divorced, you know, et cetera, and we don't have permission. You write this deal in my name. Now we're going to have a problem on closing if, you know, the evil ex finds out that I'm selling the house and there's no agreement and, you know, yada, yada. So the idea is that, number one, you're going to prevent problems. But number two, you're going to write an offer, write a listing agreement that's legally valid. And you're going to, again, be presenting yourself as extremely informed. So let's say Richard came to my house to do my listing appointment. It's just me. I show him my house. You know what? Honestly, I even forget my mother's on my house. So I would say, and you know, okay, sign the listing documents, whatever. Then later on, I don't know why he's checking it, but he looks and goes, oh my gosh. Who is Lynette Marie Snowball? Oh, that's my mother. Okay. Well, she needs to sign everything. Oh, well, she's in the hospital and I have power of attorney. Like there's a whole pile of scenarios that can come from this. But we can avoid all of this if Richard came to do my listing appointment. We're sitting there, we're chatting, we go through it, and he goes, okay, well, great. So just so you know, so I have a couple questions for you. So I see you have a couple of other people on title. Can you tell me about that? I go, oh my goodness, I totally forgot. Oh, my mother's on there, and oh, my father's on there, but he's deceased. Okay, well, great. Well, then we need to arrange time to connect with your mom and get her to sign, and is she around, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's not a big deal. It's just, this is the way it's going to go, and this is super smooth, and let's make this really easy. Does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay. So that's part of why I picked my own house, because it's a good example. Okay, so when we're on Property Online, so I'm just going to move this little thingy over here so that we can see, okay? So I have information here. So now, first of all, now they do also have, here's another lovely thing about the Registry of Deeds, they have my last name spelt wrong.
Oh, really?
Right? So there's a space in the duh and the silva. That's not a huge issue. You know, that would be something I would just do a note to file. So when you submit your listings, if you printed this and submitted it in and went, you know, spelling error, you know, land registry, and you had the ID to show, that I'm not going to call you and go, how come the names on your listings don't match? Okay, because we know this is just a data entry error. Okay, so we get the information. Now this is what I love. Some properties are registered in meters and some properties are registered in square feet. So I can tell you from a listing perspective, people assume it's always in square feet. So you want to do a conversion and put square feet as a recommendation. You're not required to on your listing cut because people look at it and go 289 square feet. They don't read that you put SQM, right, on your listing cut. So you want to do that conversion because that sounds really, really small. Now granted, I don't have a very big backyard, but it's bigger than 289 square feet, which is what people are going to think, okay? So we see over here the details and the map. Okay, so we're going to go into details first. So of course, obviously we see that it's land registered. That's the first thing you're looking for. We're looking to see the names on title. We're also checking the correct spelling of the streets and all that sort of stuff. I had a deal a little while ago. I can't remember where it was exactly, but I think it was in the Montebello area. I had written the deal based on what the actual street name was. The listing cut the street name was wrong. We had to verify, and my verification with the other side as to why I had written it a certain way on the documents was to say to the guy, you should have gone to POL. He actually listed his street wrong on mine. Anyway, so we're going to go into the details because this is where, okay, did I click it? I will apologize up front for everybody. I'm a Mac user, so sometimes I have some non-Mac issues. Okay, so here's the first thing that we see as we scroll through. This is, most people don't always click into this next page, but there's a lot of extremely important information in here. Where's my little thingy?
It's hidden behind the bar.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Okay, oops. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we see is that we can see exactly who is an actual registered interest holder. Then we can actually look at the deed, okay? So I'm going to look at the document. I'm going to download it. If I just did that to myself, didn't I? How do I get the thingy to move back?
Click on top bar.
Double click on the top bar.
No, further up, next bit up. Right, double click that.
Okay, I'll try to make it work. Okay, so here we look at the deed. We can see really, you know, this all part is, you know, the yada yada, right? But it does verify who the parties are. We have the affidavits. So then we have the parcel description. So I'm going to pull up another property that I sold a little while ago, if I can try and remember the address. And it shows in there and in your deed and in the schedule whether, this is a boring one because it's like suburbia. But in here, we're going to see when we look at a couple of other properties, this is where you're going to see whether or not the road is shared. This is where you're going to see whether or not there's a right-of-way. This is whether or not you're going to see if there's a shared well agreement. So all of those types of things are in here. So it is my opinion that when you go on a listing appointment, you should have looked at this and printed any relevant pages that are different. This is like split entry, suburbia, like, you know, in Forest Hills, not interesting, nothing weird about it, nothing to print in this deed. But I sold one out in Indian Point or Indian Harbor recently, and we had a shared well, and we had a shared road, and we had all this sort of stuff. So when I went in on the listing appointment, and I had a conversation up front about, so do we have, you know, do we have the agreement, and who looks after the snow, and what's the right of way, and who deals with that? You're already showing a higher level of knowledge, which is really why you're being hired, and why we are trying to distinguish ourselves from the for sale by owner services, because we are bringing value and knowledge. So when you distinguish yourself not only above them, but also above your peer, who you're competing with, you have a better chance of getting the listing. Okay? You will also find that when you start off with this type of information at the beginning of listing appointments, and as you go, and maybe it's the second appointment that you have this, you don't have it the first time, it's still good. What will happen is, because you have created this sense of really strong thoroughness and knowledge up front, you will find generally that clients are more receptive to your advice a little bit later on when you really need them to be listening to you. Because you've already demonstrated up front that you're the smarty pants. Okay? So now, I don't know how to make this go away.
Top right hand corner, red X.
That's just this one thing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome to Windows.
Welcome to Windows. Okay, so in this particular deed, there's really nothing interesting to look at, okay? So then the next piece of how to help you with your listing appointments is to understand the mortgage that the client has. Yes.
That says easement right away.
Yes.
So was that on the deed and we just didn't see it?
Yes. It's Nova Scotia Power.
Okay.
Okay.
Because sometimes it does say
Yeah,
that.
but you would actually, let's go back into it. Look at it again. Holly, see, Holly's being a smarty pants here. Okay. So this will also tell you if there's like a path or something like that. Let me find my easement here. Okay, so here's my legal description.
In favor of lot 608B for the purposes of installing
Municipal services, okay? So when you've looked at that, it will tell you whether or not there's something there, okay? So thank you, Holly, that is awesome. And look, I know how to close it. Yes?
Are you able to save that document you just had up like as a PDF or something like that?
Yes, you can. Yes, absolutely you can. Once it's open, you can do whatever you want with it. I don't know how to do it in anything other than a Mac, but
Yeah. I have a Mac. How do you do it on a Mac? Like,
you'll have to call me after because I'm not on a Mac now, so I know how to do it. I don't know how to explain it.
okay.
But as with all things on a Mac, if you think like you're 5 years old and it's super easy, then that's how it would work. When we're going through here, that information, does a neighbor have a right-of-way to pass through, and now you have to make sure you know that as a listing agent that if you're selling it, you can't put a fence there because you can't block that access. All of that information is there. The other piece of it is that I don't expect anybody to necessarily know the legalities of what you can and cannot do depending on what the easement is. But it gives you the opportunity to ask the question and to be able to call the lawyer or call one of your contacts and say, look, I'm listing a property and it's got this whatever, right? What do I do with that? Well, how does that affect a buyer? How does that affect a buyer who might sell this property? Does it affect their limitations of use? Okay. Rebecca.
I do have a question. So in the past, when I've opened this up, and sometimes you'll see just like the deed document, and then like Holly was saying, easement, how it says easement there.
Yeah.
Is it possible that it could just say deed and not say easement, but in that deed portion is where your easements right-of-ways would be found, and it's not listed separately?
I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think so, because if it's a registered easement, it is its own thing. Yes, okay. We're going to look at a condo as well quickly, because that's another really good example of how documents tie back to each other, okay? But the other piece of this is knowing to see the thing and ask the question, right? And that's part of where you don't put yourself in a position that you've listed a property, the other side or the lawyer review catches this stuff, then you're going back to your seller saying, okay, now we found out that we can't do this or there's this, and we might have to adjust the price, or this might bite us in the rear end on another sale if these people don't come. The more proactive we are up front with the knowledge, the more you are able to justify anything you charge, the more they're going to listen to your advice, and the more referrals you're going to get, which is ultimately where I'm trying to get you with this process, okay? Not only will it keep you out of trouble, but it will also build your business with simple things that you already have access to, okay? Yes?
Covenants are important.
Yes, yeah. So if now they would be attached, so there aren't any in this particular subdivision, but we'll try and pull up a couple random properties to find some examples. And you guys are honestly going to have to do a little digging on your own in here because, there's so many variables to how the properties can be set, but the idea is to go through it. So the next thing that we're going to see here, so you've got the party of agreement from the municipality of Halifax. That's the agreement regarding the use of land. That goes back to 1976. So this is when the first subdivision plans were filed. You can look at this stuff when you're looking at resale. In some cases in suburbia, it's less relevant, but you can certainly go back and look at it. Subject to the restrictive covenants back to 1994. That's when the development was built. So it's 20 years ago now. This is where you're going to see things like residential use, don't put a car up on blocks, you're supposed to plant a tree, all that stuff from 1994. Yeah, some of it's not relevant anymore. So this is where, but looking at it will give you some information because, and just even knowing that it's there for an older property is also relevant, so that if you did have that buyer call and go, I want to do X in this house, can I do it? I'm not sure, let me check. This is where you're going to find that answer in some cases. Rebecca?
So with those restrictive covenants, like, a subdivision that's that old.
Yeah.
I go in all the time and you'll see like, oh, I thought we weren't supposed to do that here.
Yes.
It's all over the place. So
Right. So the problem with restrictive covenants, and you all are aware of this, I think, but I'll just reiterate it for everybody, is they're all fine and good except there's really nobody to enforce them. So unless all the homeowners get together on the street and, stand with picket fences at the end of Buddy's lawn, there's really not a whole lot you can do unless what they're doing is also in violation of municipal bylaw. Then bylaw comes in, okay? But the reality is that neighborhoods tend to generally create conformity. This really isn't sort of the Wild West of, houses with lions at the end of the driveway, in, the Forest Hills area. It's not really a huge issue, right? Generally speaking, most people are pretty good. And it really has a lot to do more with zoning use that I think people are concerned about with respect to restrictive covenants, okay? So zoning is a different conversation. We'll come back to that one. So the next thing that we look at here is we see there's a mortgage. So the very first thing that I recommend to people when they're going on a listing appointment is that you should know what the mortgage is on that property. You also want to know who it's with, because it gives you an opportunity to potentially assist your partners when you're sitting with a client. So let's say, for example, I'm sitting at Holly's and I go to do her listing appointment and we're talking about the house and you want to go on the market, and we have a conversation about money, and we have a conversation saying, okay, so, if, is there a mortgage on the property? And you go, yeah. And I'll say, do you know what your balance is? No, not really. I think it's about this. Okay, do you know what your rate is? No. Do you know if it's a fixed rate or a variable rate? Because I want to know if we might have a penalty that we have to deal with, because I need to make sure there's enough money in this house and that we're going to be able to accomplish your goals to get you into the next house, et cetera, et cetera. Are you planning on moving your mortgage with you, or are you going to cancel it? So right now they're spinning a bit. They don't know what you're talking about. So if you are able to say so and have some information on the mortgage when you get there, to be able to say, so, they're like, well, I don't know if I have a fixed rate or variable. Well, I actually checked for you, just so you know the whole world can't see your mortgage, just licensed realtors, okay? And I was able to check and see that you actually have a variable rate mortgage, Holly, which is great, because that means that our penalty cannot be more than 3 months interest when we sell this house, because that's the law. So it gives you the choice. I can either, if you want to keep this mortgage, I can put you with one of my great partners who can help you. So now you're sending business over to your partners. The more you give them, the more they give you, right? Or you see something and you go, wow, okay, we might have a problem here. I just did a listing appointment last week where the clients are upside down in the house. There is not enough money for me to sell that house. They're going to be short on closing, and there's going to be a breach. So we need to figure that out, or they need to wait. So
There's going to be a what?
A breach.
What's that mean?
It means that if there is not enough money to pay out the mortgage and the recorded interests on closing, the house will not close.
Okay.
Okay, title will not be transferred to the buyers. So let's say, for example, you put a house on for $200,000 and the mortgage is $190,000. Well, by the time the mortgage is paid and the lawyer is paid and the penalty is paid and the administrative fee is paid, well, first of all, you're not getting paid. So let's just do that quick math. But let's say that comes to $205, never mind you, just to pay out the mortgage. Unless that seller actually physically comes up with $5,000 in cash on closing, title's not being transferred. The bank is not letting go until they get their money. So now you have buyers, anybody's buyers, it doesn't matter if they're yours or the other side's, sitting in a moving truck on the outside. People are suing people. There's deposits being held. People are crying. There's food thawing in a truck. Like, the whole thing is a disaster. And all of that could be avoided if you had looked at the mortgage prior to. And to be able to say, you know, I'm not sure, but I think maybe we should call your mortgage person before we put a sign on the lawn. One of the conversations that I recommend that all realtors have with their sellers is to make sure the reason that we're doing this is not because we're trying to be nosy, although we are, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we're trying to protect them. And we need to make sure that the money matches. So let's say you have a client who has no concept of what their mortgage is and doesn't understand their penalty, and they're going to buy a house and they think they're getting X amount of money out. Now there's not enough money. And maybe now they don't qualify to buy, now they're renting. Like, it's a disaster, right? And all of that can happen if we're not involved in this process. Christiane.
But I've checked sometimes, and I find some mortgage companies don't state the amount.
Okay, so if it doesn't state the amount, I can tell you from experience, it's a home line.
What does that mean?
It's a secured line of credit on the house. So that's where you say to the client, and it'll freak you out the first time you see one of those because it'll show an interest rate of about 10%. And you think, oh my God, who is their mortgage broker? What happened? What kind of credit do these people have? A secured home line is registered at a really high interest rate in case of default. Okay? So the idea is that's the opportunity to have that conversation, Christiane, and to say, you know what, I think we need to talk to your mortgage person first. Let's find out what the balance is. Let's find out what are any restrictions, et cetera, so that we can be prepared. So again, when you're sitting at the listing appointment and everybody else is coming in, and I'm going to pick on Christiane and I because we have a past history with a particular office, and I can say, I'm coming in and going, look at my gold statue, la 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 la, right? Right? Who cares? Who cares? You're the expert. I want you to look like the expert. Okay? So when you are talking about this type of thing with your clients, nobody else is having these conversations with them, I can assure you. So if I know the mortgage, so let's get back on, where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. Okay, so first of all, we see that we have a Royal Bank mortgage. So if you're thinking, for example, that I might be able to move this client over to my mortgage broker who just sent me 3 deals, not going to happen. Royal Bank doesn't play with other mortgage brokers.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Royal Bank is not offered through mortgage brokers like whatever, Mortgage Center or whatever. They only play with themselves. Nobody else, that sounds terrible, sorry. Nobody else, they don't share with others. So it means I have to partner them with a Royal Bank rep. I cannot send them to Mary at Premier Mortgages. Okay? So that's the first thing, right? So the idea, what I'd love is that you guys go in and that you are more knowledgeable than the client on their mortgage. Okay? So we're pulling up my mortgage because I got no secrets. You guys could look at it anytime you wanted if you wanted to. So I might as well, why is it not, oh, I'm on page 3. There we go. Am I going the right way? No. I apologize for my technical ineptness. Okay, so again, we see that the property matches the deed. Okay, I'm having a mouse issue here, apologize. So the first thing we're going to see here, now every mortgage company writes their mortgages differently. So it's only through practice and snooping through a lot of mortgages that you're going to get a grip on who writes them what way, what page certain things are on. Most mortgages that are registered on title are between 25 and 50 pages long. To be perfectly honest, it's really only in the first 4 pages that you're going to need anything, and that's where the amount is, the interest rate, the term, the amount, etc. Okay? Okay, really? Honestly? Okay, so here, prepayment, oh gosh, just a second here. No, that didn't work. Okay, so here we see that when I bought the house in 2011, that my original mortgage was $188,758.83, which I realize is a stupid number, but there's CMHC numbers in there, and that's why you end up with those weird things. It states as we go here the type of mortgage. Now, I will tell you that one nice thing about RBC is they have the easiest mortgages to read versus some of them. But anyway, they're all different. So here we see, number one, we have it very clear that there's CMHCs in there, so you know already that, you know, ballpark what they put down. It shows me my interest rate. Now you can all just cry at my lovely interest rate. Interest rate is prime minus 0.65.
Wow.
Isn't that a great rate? So it shows me when I took possession, it shows me the first payment, it shows me the last payment, and it shows me the monthly amount so that I can then do calculations for a client. So it says it will vary from time to time, so we know it's a variable mortgage.
Okay, that's where I was going.
Okay? I'm reading.
Does it say at the top that it's a closed mortgage as well?
Yes, so it's closed but variable. So it's a 5-year rate, so there would be a penalty if this mortgage was broken, but because it's a variable rate, it's only ever 3 months on a variable, period. End of discussion. That's a Federal Bank Act rule, okay? So in mortgages, you have two scenarios. You have variable rate, you have fixed rate. 80% of the population is going to have a fixed rate mortgage. They're paying 3.49 for the next 5 years, interest calculated, blah, 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 okay? In all of those mortgages, it will say the penalty is 3 months interest or the interest rate differential, whichever is greater. So in English, what that means is if your mortgage is at 5%, let's say it's a mortgage from before, they had bad credit or something and they ended up with a higher rate. So let's say their mortgage was at 5% and rates are now 2.99. If you break that mortgage, the bank wants 2% for every month you are breaking the mortgage because you're breaking the contract. They're losing that money, which means your penalty.
So the 2% is the difference between the 5 and the 3.
Right. The difference between the 5 and the 3. Rates are, if they were to break that mortgage and issue that mortgage today, they would lose 2% per month in interest on the amount you borrowed. So if your client breaks that mortgage, the bank is going to want an interest rate differential because that number is greater than the 3 months interest. So that's where you run into $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20,000 mortgage penalties. So if you know this before you go on the listing appointment, that there's a possibility that we're going to have more than 3 months, when you're sitting at the listing appointment and you say to your client, I see that you have a fixed rate mortgage. I see that you have an interest rate of 4.99. I think it's possible, and although I'm not a mortgage person, that you could have a penalty that is greater than 3 months. I think we need to talk to your mortgage person before we go any further to finalize your numbers. Unless they can port it. Now, important thing about porting, because we're getting a little off track with mortgage conversations here, but I'll answer it, is that clients have to requalify to port a mortgage, and not everybody knows that. Everybody requalify.
Oh, okay.
So let's say, for example, I am on maternity leave. I took my mortgage out before I was on maternity leave. I've just had the baby. I have 10 more months of maternity leave. I probably will not qualify to move that mortgage to a bigger house because I've cut my income in half. If I have pooched my credit between the time I got the house and now, I will probably not qualify to port that mortgage. It is a new mortgage. You must requalify. So when you are having these conversations and you know this information when you're sitting at the listing appointment, then if they say, well, you know, we're going to port the mortgage, and you see there's a newborn, you see this, you can say, okay, so your income is probably a little bit less now than it was when you bought the house, and now we want to go from $250 to $350. We need to check that we are qualified before we go. The answer might come back to they've got a pile of money and investments and who knows, and they're fine. But again, the point is you get this information from Property Online. So when you go on this listing appointment, you are the smartest realtor that has shown up to have a conversation. This is how Property Online can help you win the listing. Okay? So when we're looking at the mortgage, let's say they had a fixed rate of 4.9, and you know that there's only a year left in the mortgage, you might say, you know what, I think it might be worth checking. I might be able to save you money. Because even though we'd pay the penalty on the last year, if I got you into, instead of porting it, got you into a 2.99 mortgage, we'd probably save that 1 year penalty in the first year. Why don't I put you with one of my great people? So now you're offering value add. The only way you know this stuff and the only way you know to ask these questions is because you found it in Property Online.
I want to put them with that person.
Yeah, I know.
I would be happy to introduce you all to my lovely RBC person.
You couldn't do that in this particular case because it's RBC, right? Or, I mean, you could send them to an RBC
That's right,
person,
absolutely.
but just an RBC.
Just an RBC person. But let's say they go, I now hate RBC. I don't personally hate RBC, but let's say I go, right? And I go, okay, but you know what? Well, then why don't I put you with my person from wherever?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because they have this available or whatever, and maybe the penalty is worth paying, and now I can put you with another institution.
Right.
The point is you get to have this conversation with the clients, and you get to offer service, which is why they're hiring you. So if you're having this type of conversation, and in a lot of cases, they may have the answers right off the top of their tongue. Yeah, they're organized, they know their numbers. Okay, great. But you're still distinguishing yourself from the other person who came in with a really fancy PowerPoint about their brand and their services and all that kind of stuff. Okay, great. Who cares? They want to know about their money. They want to know that you know and are competent to handle the largest single transaction they're ever going to do at one time. And there's a pile of information in this database that will help you do that, that will help you head off problems before they become a problem. Okay? Does anybody have any questions so far in general?
Are we supposed to get a copy of the death certificate?
If you need something. You need, and you don't need to, the question was, do you need a copy of the death certificate? The answer is you need some sort of proof. If they don't want to give you a death certificate, if they don't have a copy, if they don't feel comfortable with that, then all you need is a letter from a lawyer who can verify that, okay, on the file, okay? Same thing as powers of attorney. You are required to take a copy of the power of attorney, okay? By the way, it must be in the file. Yeah, it must be in the file. It must accompany your listing documents, please and thank you, or I will find you. Layla has a question.
Sorry guys, again. If the power of attorney is, say you're the buyer's agent and the seller's agent has a copy of the power of attorney or it's there.
Right.
You can't really have a copy of it.
This is as a listing. Okay, if you're a buyer's agent, then you could potentially, if you've caught this, when you go to write the deal as a buyer, you can say to the other agent, so I see there's 3 names on title, right? And so you could write in your offer, proof of, this person or whatever being, verification from a lawyer or something that this person is no longer on title, et cetera, okay? Now let's flip gears for a second and let's become a buyer's agent and talk about Property Online, because I know I said for listings, but there's another piece of this, which is that if you look at the list, if you look at the mortgage of a property you're trying to offer on and look at the title and look at all of that, first of all, you're going to find that in a lot of cases, you're going to correct other listing agents and you're going to write names in the offer that maybe weren't in the listing cut. Okay? You're going to find that sometimes MLS numbers are wrong and you're going to correct it in the listing cut. So you're going to correct that in your offer and fix that so that we then, again, don't have another problem for your buyer. The other thing, hang on Rebecca for me 1 second because it'll leave my brain, is that let's say you have a client who wants a deal. I'm sure no one's ever had a client like that who wants to lowball a property. Right? And you're like, ugh, I don't even want to write this thing. So sometimes what you can do in part of your ability to work with a buyer is to have pre-researched the property. You can see how much somebody owes and do the basic math on the property. So that's on for $200. You see there's a mortgage from 2 years ago at $190. Well, unless they made some really extraordinary payments, they probably owe pretty darn close to that, right? So going in at 182 or 175 is a total waste of time because they can't pay the mortgage out.
Can you have that, you can't really have that conversation with your buyer though, can you?
Why can't you?
I don't know, can you?
Sure.
Feels like you can't,
So-
though. It does feel like you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like if I was to say, well, look, I just happen to know that, the seller is not gonna be able to, accept this because they can't afford to, or.
Or we may
however-
run into that
Or
issue.
we may run
Yeah.
into a problem because why? Like, how do I know that?
Because I looked at their mortgage.
Okay. So I just wanted to know, like, if that's why.
You don't work for the seller.
No, exactly, but, I don't know, I just feel like I'm
It's no different than advising them on what they should offer. Assuming they're a client, right? We're not talking about customers, okay?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
So they're a client.
Yeah.
You advise your clients on what to offer based on
Okay,
market
that's
value,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. If
As
you
long as
say,
I can do it, okay.
absolutely. So you can say, we can try, but I'm just giving you a heads up.
Right.
Based on my math, well, I don't think there's enough money to close, right?
So, yeah, that also makes you look very smart buyer's agent.
Yes.
As opposed to going, yeah, I'll write that on. for
Yeah,
70.
well, let's
And then
try.
come back and go, yeah, I'll come to you at 200. And you're like, well, why did you write the offer?
Right. It lets you inform your clients, right? So it's, the one time you cannot see what is owed is a foreclosure. The
Yeah.
mortgage gets wiped, okay? But remember, banks are not selling bargain basement houses anymore. They're done with that, okay? So the end result is that in this database is all of this magical information that if you actually take the time to interpret it, you can go on a listing appointment or have a buyer appointment and give them advice that is really valuable. So imagine that you're sitting at this listing appointment, you're having this conversation about, you see they own this and you see that there's this rate and we might have this penalty and we have this conversation and, oh, if you port, blah, 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 I see all this stuff and, oh, by the way, I realize now that you have an easement on the property or buddy behind you has the right to walk through and he's like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that and oh yeah, I know, we don't speak to him and he's evil and blah, 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 right? So now you're having this kind of a conversation at your listing appointment versus the other person that came in and went, well, we have a 10-step marketing plan and blah, 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 right? And they say, well, how much do you charge? And you say the same thing as somebody else, hypothetically without price fixing, of course. So who do you think looks like they're actually earning their money? Okay, so this is the purpose of my going through this with you. Okay, now I'm just going to we'll just look at a condo really quickly, so that we can just see a couple of other things. So I'm going to pick on my poor mother here.
I noticed too that with property online, that before you had to take everything out and now you can just reset it and it'll go away.
Yes.
Before you couldn't do that.
Now I'm also going to just give you a bit of a statement here with respect to property online and its uses. Okay, so everybody is aware that you are not allowed to solicit for listings through property online. Okay, it's a drag. Yeah, it's a drag. So I'm going to give you an example, and I think I gave this example to somebody else once, but I'll give it out as well. So there was an agent with another office who sent like recipes and a yada yada I'm fabulous letter to my mother. She's in this condo in Whitehall. Okay, so the envelope came to Lynette Snowball and John Snowball. So two things. The only person that calls my mother Lynette would be Revenue Canada. She goes by Lynn. My father is dead, and he went by David. The absolutely only place on the planet that there would be this information is on property online. So it was immediately obvious that that is what this person had done. My mother was wild. Wild is not the word. 78 years old and fuming. She was really unhappy. I want you to do something over this. Call whoever you need to call. The fact that I'm chair of professional standards, the expectation was a little bit higher. But all I'm saying to you is that you need to be very aware that the information that's here is really subjective. And if you are caught soliciting through property online, you can have your rights removed to use property online, which will affect your compliance with NSAR, which means you can have your membership in NSAR, and which means access to Philogics and lockboxes removed, in addition to being fined by both parties. So please don't do it. If you are trying to gather information in terms of a street, or you're trying to solicit, what you're going to gather from there is how many houses are on the street. You can gather approximately what the values are, what the assessment rates are, how often they've transferred title. You know, you can get that kind of information. You can dear homeowner people on a street, but you cannot specifically target out of property online.
Because what I did is I went and just looked at, I was actually doing a person, right?
Mhm.
And then I just kind of looked around a little bit and thought, okay, how long have they, because I remember hearing the 7-year cycle kind
Yeah.
of thing or whatever, so I kind of looked to see how long those people.
And that's general information, but you're not walking up to Lynette Marie Snowball
Right, exactly.
going, hi, I just happened to find your name. Like, you're not going to find that anywhere. It's not in the phone book. It's no, my mother still has a landline. It's not what her name is on Canada 411. Like, there's no other way. And anybody who ever met my father, you would never have called him John, and you certainly would never have called him Dave. So, so it's that type of information where you're giving it away, and you're clearly breaching. And immediately, it wouldn't have mattered what this woman had done. If she told my mother she could get her $1 million for her house, my mother felt her privacy had been invaded. Technically, it had been, because it was used not for the purposes that it's intended for. This is intended to be a database of information for real estate professionals to have access to the legal information regarding the sale of property. That is what this is for. It is not meant ever to be a mechanism to solicit business. There are ways you can certainly use the data in here to go and do prospecting, but you need to be very careful with it, is the only message that I have for you there. So what we're looking at here, so you can see the group of us up top here, so that's my house. Then you can see the condo, and then you'll see there's this other one that's got a $1,000 value. Does anybody know what that would be? Troy.
Deeded access parking.
It is a deeded parking space.
Oh.
Okay?
Oh, because it's a condo. Right?
It's a condo. So they own 2 parking spaces. So when somebody says, oh, I have 2 parking spaces, and you go, oh, is it deeded? And they go, yeah. And you look on here and go, no, they rent it. Okay? The information that's in here, and it's not that clients are intending to mislead you, they just don't understand the difference. They've always had that parking spot. As far as they're concerned, it's a parking spot. If you market a condo and say you have 2 deeded parking spots and you don't, you're buying someone a parking spot. The parking spots in this unit go for $12,000. I really don't want to buy anybody a parking spot, thank you very much. And she actually pays property taxes on it. So that means that I need 2 tax bills. Do you see how you're more informed now when you have that listing appointment and you're gathering documents? Okay, Layla has a question.
It wasn't a question, it was a statement, and you're right. I saw a condo.
Louder.
My buyer bought a condo on Federal's Lake.
Yep.
The listing said 2 deeded parking spots. I went online and couldn't find the 2 deeded
Parking spots, yeah. So,
I flagged it to the lawyer.
Yep.
I said, there's a problem here, could you please verify? The day we closed, the lawyer said to the buyer, oh, you know, it's the agent's fault.
okay, now lawyers throwing us under the bus, that's a different conversation entirely, okay? But what I want you, yeah.
I mean, it actually.
It does happen, right? So this is where, I'm going to put it this way. Do not assume that what you see in a listing cut is accurate, okay? It's our job to check it. And it's your job as a seller's agent to make sure you never have to go back to a buyer or a seller and say, okay, we might have to adjust your price now, or this deal could fall apart because it's not deeded. You should know that. That's your job. You need to know that first, okay? So when we go in here, we have the condo, etc. So when I go into the details of the condo, oh gracious, I really do not like this mouse. So the other thing it says here under comments, to view all documents affecting this unit, including condominium common interests, it is important to review the Condominium Corporation's Common View HCCC number 239, Building B, et cetera, et cetera. So the declaration, the common element rules, the bylaws, all of that stuff are already here in Property Online.
They are.
They are. You should never have to collect those from a client. The only thing you need to collect from a client is the financial statements and any updates to the common elements or memos that have gone out. It also means you never have to scan them or print them. You can email them as PDF. They're all right here. Okay? So, Holly's mouth is,
I know.
she is aghast at this moment. Okay.
Oh, I love it. Works so much with another condo.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go back up here. So right here, we have the registered interest. So this is where that agent caught herself, okay? So I can view the document, look at the deed. Also tells you, when you look in here, something else, I've lost my mouse again. Oh, there it is. Something else that it tells you, because you've got the registration date on the deed. So it tells you when you're going to go back and look the history up in Philogix.
Okay.
The deed here, registration date was September 3rd, 2008. When I look at the deed, it's going to tell me they took possession on whatever day. Okay? It tells me then, when I'm looking at the history of this property in Philogix, or Millennium, or what the heck it's called, I know when to look, because I know when they bought it.
And what are you looking for? Sorry, Dennis.
I'm in Philogix. I'm trying to research the past listing cut or whatever, trying to find,
Okay,
I now know when to look.
Okay.
So,
Right.
what it will tell you, if you go back in Philogix and you can't find it, it tells you they bought privately. Or they, well, generally the lot, well, sometimes you have to go by the lot, right, the legal description if it was new construction, but if it's a 20-year-old house and they bought it 5 years ago and it's not in Philogix, they probably bought privately. So now you have, again, you have more information. Or you know who they bought from, or you know what they paid. You know, you're just, again, more informed. So then we go to the benefits and registered interests. So there's a whole pile of stuff here because it's a condo. So you would want to look at those. I'm not going to open all of them now because it's really not.
And so those are the,
Servient tenements, easements, rights of way. And a lot of it has to do with stuff that's under the parking lot and, you know, really, you know,
oh, okay.
it's general stuff. But let's look at the various interests, okay? So there's a lot because it's a condo. So we've got various PIDs, easement row holder, because what that will do is that will tie almost every PID in the building as being subject to the restrictions of X. Halifax Water, everybody has to agree, because when you sell a condo, it's all tied together, right? And everybody has to, by default, agree to certain things. So I'm going to move to the restrictive covenants. Covenant holder is in the deed. So I can see that there's restrictive covenants there. The declaration and bylaws are right there. The regional is party to the agreement, so some of this stuff goes back to when it was being built, Nova Scotia Power. But let's look at the restrictive covenants or declaration and bylaw. It's right here. So I can download this image and email it, or it'll be a huge file. You might have to Dropbox it, okay? So here it'll also warn you when other things are tied to it to go back and look at it, okay? So you must review the associated documents to affect the instruments that they have. So, okay, thank you. So you'll see now we have 69 pages. This is my declaration. Declaration of the Halifax Condominium Corporation number 239. So you can review that. You can email it to the lawyer immediately. You have it on file. You can load it up under documents. So it's already there. You don't have to chase people for it. On Philogix, you can have that uploaded.
Oh, so you can upload this from POL to Philogix.
Yep. And then you don't have to email somebody something, they've already got it. Okay? So that's there. The bylaws are at the end of that document. The restrictive covenants are attached to the deed. So then you'll see that there's amendments. So that's where you want to look at the dates. So here we see an amendment, not condominium, was changed by the regional municipality. So we can look at these things here. If I clicked it, press properly. Okay. So these are attached to the declaration. So Clayton Developments built the building. This is another thing. adding other PIDs to it, Schedule A. In a lot of cases, to be perfectly honest, most of this stuff is not relevant to us specifically, but it is attached to it. So if you say to a client, can I have a copy of your declaration, and they only give you half of it, and you look on Property Online and see that there's 5 other documents that are attached, technically you're responsible to give them all of them. Okay? So it allows you, but honestly, you can make yourself more valuable when you're sitting at the listing appointment again, because you're saying, oh, I don't need you, oh, they've like, oh, I have a file, it's in the bottom of this, and it's all wrinkled, and you take it, and you're like, no, don't worry about that. I got it. I've got all that stuff. All I need is your memos and the minutes from the meetings and your financial statements from the condo. Oh, I don't know where that stuff is. Okay, well then, why don't you send an email to the property manager, copy me on it, giving them permission to give it to me. And now your client's not running around chasing documents. Okay? The point being is that, and then we can also see the mortgage. Oh, shock and surprise, my mother has the same mortgage person as I do. And so I can see that as well. Okay? You're also going to see if there is no mortgage, which is pretty rare. I'll give you an example. I recently had a sale on a property where on final walkthrough, the back wall of the house was leaking. It was like raining in the house. It was awesome. Like it was raining inside through the windows on 3 levels. Like this is not a minor thing. So call the other side, blah, 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 call the lawyer. Well, I already knew there was no mortgage on this property. So was able to, well, I don't know why that keeps doing that. I was able to have a conversation with our client's lawyer and the other side to talk about whether or not it was realistic to do a holdback and delay closing, because I already know whether or not there's any money in this flippin' house. We did a $25,000 holdback, delayed closing by 2 weeks until the contractors come in. They ripped off the whole back wall of the house. There was a condo. It was a condo. Part of it was the condo's responsibility. Part of it wasn't, because it was because the guy put the windows in, and it was his guy who put the windows in, so it wasn't the condo's problem, and blah, blah, blah. So, but the long and short of it is we were able to say to my clients, okay, well, you know what? There's actually money in this house. There's no mortgage, or there's only a mortgage of this from this year long ago. We might have a chance of actually making this work, because if they owe $190 and the house sold for $210, there's no $25,000 to fix this. We're probably going to have to walk away. So again, even as a buyer's agent, you're able to be a little more helpful. I do not know why.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Keep. Thank you. I just see warnings coming up. You're able to keep your client calm. You're able to provide value. You're able to provide solutions and negotiate with the other side because you know where the status of things are. It gives you an opportunity, if you see there's no mortgage when you're doing a listing appointment, to talk to clients about potentially partnering them with, they say, I'm going to take 100% of my mortgage, I have all the cash in the house, I'm going to pay cash for the next house. And you might say, well, you know what? I'm not a financial planner, but it might be worth having a conversation with one of my partners, because mortgage money is the cheapest form of money. Maybe they might recommend that you put some into RSPs and increase your tax savings and put a small line of credit on the house, because mortgage money is only 3%, and we might be able to create some additional financial wealth for you here. But the only reason you can have that conversation is because you have a sweet flippin' clue, I was going to say something else, about what's going on with the property. Okay, so the long and short of this, because we could spend all day on Property Online, and I realize it sounds like, how could you possibly do that as Property Online? But when you start to go in and you start to read the deeds, and you start to see the easements, and you start to see the shared roads, and you start to see all that stuff, what I want you to get from this is that the 89 cents or whatever it is you pay to log in here when you go on a listing appointment, or you go to write an offer on a property as a buyer, is there's an awful lot of information in here that can have you 2 steps ahead, so that you are aware, or you can advise your buyer or your seller that this may become an issue. I think it's okay, or let's check with the lawyer, or let's get expert advice, or let's look at this, so that just in case we have a plan. Then if the thing comes up, we go, okay, great, we planned for this. Shoot, they figured it out, right? But you're ahead of the curve, which makes you the valued expert, which means please pay me whatever commission I would like, and please send me to all of your friends and family, because I am just awesome. Okay? And that's what you're going to get from understanding what's in here. There's more to your value than just being able to price the property, than being able to negotiate a successful deal. There's you being the trusted advisor and giving that advice to your seller and catching the things later that we shouldn't have had to catch. We should know what the legal names are. We should be able to ask that question. We shouldn't be doing amendments about that stuff because it's right here. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on what we've covered today that I have not answered?
I did have one.
Rebecca, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yep.
We were talking about writing an offer and making sure it's the right PID.
Yeah.
When you put that on paper and it's not matching what the listing cut is, do you have to make notes?
No.
You just
The listing cut is an advertisement.
Right.
It is not a contract. Okay? So when you run into those situations where you're changing information from what the other agent has put, I would recommend a really nice chat with that agent in a non-condescending tone, where you might say, oh my goodness, I know you probably just, just so you know, I put a different number on there just because I realized it was probably just a typo. Like, whatever, right? However you want to position that so that you're not, basically saying, really? You didn't know that was wrong PID? Because that would not be nice for negotiations. That's not going to help you, okay? But you want it right because it's going to get caught later, okay? Any other questions? Layla's giving me a look.
Not pertaining actually on property online, or maybe it is in a way. So you have a married couple and she's the only one who owns the house of rental property online.
His name goes on the listing agreement.
Because it's marital.
But not on
Marital.
the addendum,
On everything.
on everything.
They sign everything.
He signs everything.
He signs
But
everything.
Would his name also be on the residential addendum?
Yes. Everything. If you see, okay, so the question was, I'm married, my spouse's name is not on title. Does his name go on the documents? Yes. The answer is yes.
And is that because it's marital?
Matrimonial.
That's the
Yes.
one.
Or if he says he doesn't want to, it's on it.
It's not a question.
It doesn't have to be on there, it does have to.
He does have to be
Oh,
on
it
there.
does.
Yes.
If he lives in the house, it has to be.
If he, yeah. If they, no, he doesn't have to live in the house. They have to be married. Because the Matrimonial Act trumps everything else. So they could have been not married when she bought the house, and then they got married and they move into the
Right,
house,
and that happens, right.
right?
Yeah.
So now, they didn't go back and update the deed because nobody does. It doesn't matter whether they're now divorcing. She can't sell that house without his signature.
Going back to the Middle Ages.
Yeah. Well, it used to be the other way around. It used to be that, with all due respect to the men in the room, that men would sell houses out from underneath women.
Right.
Then it became the flip side, which is men went away in the military, came home and had no house. So, and that happened, and has happened many times. So now the idea is that just nobody's selling anybody's anything if you're married, unless the other side signs off. Okay? Now, if they don't sign off, if they're not going to sign, then you would need some sort of letter. You'd have to, get some sort of authorization or letter from a lawyer or something saying that they're waiving their right or whatever.
Okay, because I was going to say, on our listing agreement somewhere, it says you have the
Permission.
permission, so that means nothing really.
Not honestly, really nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and the ideal scenario is, if you're sitting there, like if I'm sitting with you, Holly, and you're divorcing, and Troy is the evil ex-husband over there who's about to be, he is evil, yes. And you say, oh yes, I have his permission. But he's not sitting there with you.
Right.
Do you really have permission? No, you do not. You need consensus from both parties, or one
Or
person is
they
giving permission that they don't have the authority to give. Okay?
So how do you know if they're, like you could go into a house that it wasn't on the deed and
There's a status of affidavit of matrimonial status on the original deed. And to be you can ask all the right questions. If a husband shows up out of the woodwork later and you've done all your due diligence, then you've done all your due diligence, right? you know, or a wife. I'm being prejudicial here. I apologize. Right? I'm picking on the evil Troy. Right? Okay. So I'm going to close us off here. I hope Layla has one more question. Yes.
So sorry. Don't be sorry.
No. I love questions.
So we're doing a condominium, we're listing a condominium, and you go online and you see all those wonderful papers there, which you no longer have to print and lug.
And print and lug, yes.
Who's actually responsible to get the documents to the buyer's agent?
The seller's agent. It says in the agreement that the seller's agent will provide them within 5 days or whatever. So you can download them, put a link on Dropbox, email the other agent and go, here you go. Right?
Everything should be updated on it.
Yes. Now, again, if you have, like that's where you have to ask the client the question, have there been any memos, any notices sent? Because not all that stuff gets registered. Because when you provide condo documents, you have to provide meeting minutes and notices of, you know, special meetings and all that stuff. None of that stuff is on Property Online. And it's extremely rare, honestly, that declarations get updated like after the fact. It's pretty rare. Not to say it can't ever happen. But that's where sometimes it's worth getting written consent from your clients or having them contact the property management company in order to ensure that you have in fact provided everything. And that way you have best protected your seller from there being some memo and they missed that one in the pile and it talks about something important like a new roof or something, right? So a lot of times, depending on the client, some clients will hand you this in. I remember I had this one client who had those file folders that were like built-in tabs and they handed me this thing. I was like, whoa, it was so exciting, right? But you'll also get clients who are digging through the kitchen drawer, right, looking for stuff. So, you know, that's your decision. And sometimes it's just worth saying, you know what, no matter what you've handed me, let's just send a quick email to the property management just to be sure there's nothing else I'm missing. I want your life to be simple. My job is to facilitate this for you. I'm the expert. I already know people are going to want these things, so let's do it now. Versus, you know, it's Saturday at 7 p.m. when you get the offer, you know, now you're running around, the property manager's on vacation, right? It's the same thing as power bills and tax bills and all that stuff. You already know you're going to need it. Get it up front. It's not a big surprise when someone says, I'd like power bills. Last time I checked anyway, right? So that's the whole idea behind this, okay? Yes, Troy?
With regards to the errors you're talking about, what if they're actually just living in the
If they're common law?
Well,
Well, you have to ask the question.
and then what?
Well,
actually,
if they're common,
what's the law on this property?
okay, so if you're common law, the question is, have you registered? No, it does. If you have you registered with Registry of Joint Stocks as common law? If you have, then the Matrimonial Act applies. You also have to be prepared to have this conversation with same-sex couples.
But
Okay, like you need to get over if you have any, you know, shyness issues. You need to say, like, if they're a common law couple, oh, we're common law. Okay, great. Have you registered with Registry of Joint Stocks?
they don't. They haven't.
Are you married? Well, they'll tell you if they're married usually, right? But you need to ask the question, right? Just Troy.
Well, so what if whatever, either one they are or they aren't, but yet they're buying a property and they only want to put it in one person?
Goes back to the mortgage issue. That's, if, you know, you can put the deed in one person's, you can write a deal in one person's name as long as that's what the mortgage is going to allow, right?
So as long as it's always in one person's name, regardless of whether they're married or not, it's fine.
No. Say that again. Are we talking about a purchase or a listing?
Yeah, they're going to buy something.
They're going to buy something.
They want to put it in the marriage name.
Right.
That happens.
That happens all the time. It's usually a financing issue, right? It doesn't matter because the Matrimonial Act, if they're married, the Matrimonial Act covers them, right?
This is for a purchase, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I don't know if anybody ever watched Eddie Murphy's Raw stand-up. Anyway, he has a, Richard's looking at me. There's a big skit in there about this particular woman that he marries from Africa, and she wants half, Eddie, I want half, and there's this big, huge thing, and it's kind of rude, and anyway, but the whole joke about it is that they're going to, like, there is this division of assets in marriage, whether you like it or not, right? And that it doesn't matter whether their name's on anything. It's the same, like pensions or anything. So the Matrimonial Act covers all that stuff.
Okay, so other than being married, if they want to buy something, put it in the other person's name. That's
Well, then you're getting into a different issue of are they paying the mortgage, do we need cohabitation agreements, et cetera. That's a different conversation, and we can do a session on that type of stuff. Right now, I just want to try and keep us moderately on track.
But if we're on a listing.
Yep.
And the people are living together, they're not married, they're not registered, which from what I understand, more than half.
Are not
people
registered.
Don't even have a clue that that's what they should be.
Yes.
And so you don't, so
Mary and Bob
Mary and Bob.
are living
Bob
together.
bought the house.
Right.
Okay, it's in Bob's name.
Yep.
The day Bob marries Mary, I should have named her Barb. The day that Bob marries Barb.
Yep. Now
Next day, Barb now,
has to sign,
right, is half owner of that house.
unless they have an agreement
Unless
otherwise.
they have an agreement. But
Yes.
we're talking the
Yep.
regular, normal.
Yep.
Well, not regular, normal, but most people
Yes.
don't know that.
Correct.
So, my two people, I forget their names already.
Bob and Barb.
Bob and Barb. So now, if we go to list Bob and Barb's house.
Yes, we need
2
Barb.
weeks, we need Barb.
We need Barb.
Even though Bob is the only one on the deed.
Doesn't
and
matter.
Bob is,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
right on.
Yeah,
And
and
a lot of people don't understand that
Yes.
because they think, oh, well, Bob bought the house, it's Bob's house.
yes.
And we're only married for 2 weeks. Well, no, Barb's house now,
Yeah.
half of it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
So a lot of times it's a question of just asking the questions, and they might go, oh no, we have a prenup, et cetera. I don't have any
Right.
right to the house. Then I would want her to sign a waiver.
Mhm.
Honestly, I would want something
Mhm.
in writing saying that I acknowledge this, or
Mhm.
that type of thing, so that later she doesn't pop up at the end, and now you have a buyer, and now she's not going to sell, and the whole
Yeah.
thing that happens from there.
And then on the buying end of that scenario, she doesn't have, if they're living together and not married, Barb does not have to sign anything.
It's their choice.
Unless-
That's right. It
Yeah.
depends on and usually on the purchase, it's more about financing than anything else, right? And there's been scenarios where all of you will have done deals where you actually can't have a person because they're sucking the credit down,
Exactly.
and you need to kick
Yeah.
them off.
Yeah.
They're still protected because of the Matrimonial Act in
And you
that
don't
case.
need Barb's permission to sell Bob's house if they're not married.
If they're not married, no. She's SOL. Okay. Thank you guys very much. I hope you got something out of this. And we are recording this. We did record this for whatever
Yes, this is awesome.
quality it was. I don't know. And I look forward to the next one. Thank you guys. Thanks guys who are online.
Thank you.